had doggies everywhere. Hey guys, I'm Jen, this is my channel Sir Tommy, and today I'm doing a wrap-up video for all the books I read in February. It was a good reading month. I read 11 books, which is crazy, so I'm just going to get straight into reviewing them. And also, I have extra dogs, so don't be surprised if they're dancing in the background. Okay, so the first book I read in the month of February was Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. I loved this book. I know most people love this book. And I wish there was more, although the second book, Down in the Sticks and Bones, has come out in the last month, I believe. If you don't know, Every Heart a Doorway is basically about kids who open doors into other worlds that are basically their heart's desires, like their real homes. Yes, hello Evie. And then after a certain period of time, they have been forcibly removed or ejected from those worlds. And since they're traumatized, they end up in Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Teens, which is basically where all of these kids end up so that they can go to therapy. So Every Heart a Doorway follows Nancy, who is an asexual character. Alright, we love that representation. As she's trying to adjust to living in this home and learning everyone's stories and about, you know, all these different types of worlds, and it's fantastic. The world building is incredible. It definitely could have been expanded on because honestly it was the most interesting part of the story. The characters were excellent and really morally ambiguous, but not in your traditional way. It just really spun that whole good and evil thing on its head, which was so cool. And I mean, the diversity was great. I mean, we had an asexual main character, a trans boy side character, we had a Latinx character who was kind of my favorite, and then we had twin girls. It was just well balanced. The murder mystery that was kind of a surprise in there probably wasn't like wonderful. I kind of predicted who it was and all that sort of stuff, but in the end I just really enjoyed it and I loved it, and I thought it was going to be my favorite book of the month, but there were more. But I loved it and I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I read The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson, which was a non-fiction book, and it followed two stories. One of the 1891-92 Chicago World Fair exposition thing that happened, and how that came to be and the role that architects really played in how that came to be, which was fascinating. And also at the same time a serial killer who named H.H. Holmes, and how he basically got away with murdering a bunch of people because, you know, the city was distracted by the exposition. So it was very interesting. It was basically a long-form journalism piece, in my opinion, turned book. Now my background is in journalism. I have studied long-form journalism pieces. That is my area of preference. I don't want to say expertise because I'm not an expert, but I read a lot of them. So for me it was okay, but I've read better, and I think the story could, like the content itself was amazing, and Larson definitely kind of followed the thing. If the facts are interesting, don't pretty them up, which works in journalism, but not so much in books. Like, you do need, especially for such a long piece, you do need some engagement with the characters, and that just wasn't possible, and I think it should have been done a different way. That being said, it was still a good book, and I learned a lot about it. I learned a lot from it, which was really cool. But in the end, I gave it 3 stars because, I don't know, I kind of had to push myself through it towards the end. Can't be helped. The next book I read was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, which I feel like if you don't know what that book is about by now, I ain't going to spoil it for you. So I'm not going to tell you the plot, but I am going to say that I really enjoyed it. I read it really fast, probably in like 2 sittings. The moral ambiguity is something I loved, but at the same time, the way it was done was really also frustrating, but not in a bad way. It was just, I wanted to shake the characters in the book, which in the end, I kind of feel like it's kind of what Gillian Flynn was going for. So, the writing was so well done. The character development was excellent. And the plot was just original and good. What else can I really say about this? So in the end, I gave it 4 stars just because, you know. Just because. Okay, so then after that, I read a short story called The Shadow over Innsmouth, which is written by H.P. Lovecraft, which he's a phenomenon in himself. So if you don't know H.P. Lovecraft, you can look it up and read into it, but basically he's a famous author who kind of, I don't know if you want to say he kind of created his own type of horror genre, but it's kind of what he did, and he's very well known for it. His most famous book is Call of Cthulhu, and if you wanted to start reading H.P. Lovecraft, I would recommend that one. I read that last year and I really enjoyed it. And Shadow over Innsmouth wasn't as good. I'm not going to tell you what it's about. It's a short story. Go in blind and just write it. It's great. I mean, you really read H.P. Lovecraft for his writing and the atmosphere he builds, and less for his plots and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, it's very creative. His writing is over the top and flamboyant, but in a way that's actually really enjoyable, or at least that's what I've heard in discussions I've had about H.P. Lovecraft. So The Shadow over Innsmouth was good. Not the book I would recommend people starting with when it comes to H.P. Lovecraft, but in the end I gave it 3 stars. So, you know, a good solid read if you've read some H.P. Lovecraft and want to read more. So then I picked up a Victoria Schwab book because I had to read Victoria Schwab because she's so popular in BookTube and her plots sound very interesting. So I picked up Vicious, and oh, okay, I loved it. Basically, Vicious follows 2 best friends, Victor and Elliot. It would be embarrassing if I got that wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's Victor. And their tales in college of them basically doing, you know, the science research. And then it kind of gets to their head a little bit and things progress from there and they end up being arch nemesis. And then the book kind of follows the inevitable clash between the 2 of them. And it is excellent. Let me just say, if you like a Death Note, you should read this book, because I was having L and Light moments the entire time. It was so good. But it wasn't just those 2 characters who were fascinating. I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved Elliot and Victor Vale. I loved the confrontations. I loved the intimacy that was involved between their friendship / enemy-ship. But the writing was so good, and to be honest, I really enjoyed the superpower element in this because it was just so well thought out. Every power had a purpose. I loved the idea that it was linked to a specific thing about the person too. They just didn't get random powers. I loved the consequences of everything. That seemed to be a huge deal. And I know that there's supposed to be a sequel to Vicious, and I could see certain things indicating that, but I wasn't sure if it was actually going to happen. So I'd be interested in picking up the sequel. I have to say Serena was my favorite character. I really loved her. And I would love to read more from her perspective, even though I understand as a sequel that would be very difficult. So overall I gave Vicious 5 stars because, oh my god, I loved it. I will pick up more Victoria Schwab in the future, I think. But if you haven't read Vicious and you really love Death Note, then you should read it. And if you really liked Vicious and you want to get into some anime or manga, I would recommend Death Note because it's very similar. Alright, so then I read The Pure Gold Baby by Margaret Drabble. This one's been on my radar for a little while because essentially it's about a girl with like autism, and it's kind of like not specified, which is kind of good, because it can be tricky. So basically it's about this main character whose name I can't remember, but she has a daughter who ends up being special needs, and they refer to her as the pure gold baby because she is so childlike and innocent and, you know, pure gold, but pure gold's also really heavy, and so she is quite a heavy responsibility. And so basically it just follows their relationship and, you know, as they get older and how they deal with certain issues, things like, you know, family, relationships. The neighborhood community was a really interesting aspect. So the writing for this book was interesting. It was told from a really weird perspective. Like, the narrator wasn't either of the main characters. It was like a removed ones, which I know was deliberate, but I thought was really weird, and I didn't really appreciate the stuff that added. It also just meant ridiculously unreliable narrator. And at the end of the book, I was like, I wanted to love it because my sister has autism, and I wanted to see, you know, more portrayals of that in books, and the portrayal of it was excellent, but everything else was just a bit meh. And I finished the book being like, I didn't really take much away from that. So for that, I gave this book 3 stars because I enjoyed it-ish, but would I read it again? Probably not. Do with that what you will. I kind of have to show you guys this. This is the most ridiculous. It's just chilling in the corner, several feet off the ground on my embarrassingly high pile of stuff. Hey, make a bite. Make a bite. Say hello. You trying to hide? So now we're moving on to arguably what was my favourite book of the month, and that was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. My accent, I don't know. Oh my god, I forgot how much I love sci-fi when it's done well, and this is sci-fi done well, okay? It's kind of a convoluted plot. If you like political intrigue, if you like really good social politics, if you like really well done worlds, like built up worlds of different aliens and unique cultures, and it's really thought out, I highly recommend this book because essentially it's a mix between Star Trek and Firefly in book form, and if you love those two things, I highly, highly recommend it. Essentially, it follows this cruise ship on the Wayfarer. That's what the series is called, the Wayfarer series, because A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is book 1 in the Wayfarer series. Basically, it follows the Wayfarer crew, who have a whole range of diversity and interesting issues they're all personally dealing with, and they're kind of like laborers but in space, and they build pathways for like ships to travel through to like save time, kind of like wormholes. It's very confusing, but the science was written so well, the characters were so interesting, they all had things to hide, and just, I don't have words for how good this book was. It was amazing. I believed every relationship, and I just appreciated the thought. And Becky Chambers, both her parents were like astrophysicists, scientists kind of things, so like she knows what she's writing about, and she genuinely has an interest in it. So if you love sci-fi or you just love really well built worlds, I highly recommend this book because I gave it 5 stars, and it's like my all-time favorite book now. So okay, so I was kind of in a sci-fi mood, so I picked up another book that was sci-fi, and that's Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie. And this book basically follows a ship that can have all it can. Basically follows a ship that has lots of soldiers, and they're inside each of the soldiers, so they have like an omnipresent mind. So the perspective is actually told from like 50 people, but they're all the same person, so it's very weird. And they definitely play with gender binaries, because the culture that the ship belongs to, they don't specify gender. Everyone's referred to as her. So it's really cool. It messes with your head a little bit. It's so heavy in political intrigue, which is actually something I love. It wasn't, to me, I didn't love it as much as I loved The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and because I had literally just read that, you know, I was comparing it in my head. But given how much I loved The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, I still gave Ancillary Justice 4 stars. Because it was good. It was so well thought out. The plot was heavy. The characters were interesting. You got the motivations behind everything. Yes, sometimes it got confusing, but I thought it was a solid start to a book series, and I enjoyed the premise. I enjoyed the reading of it, and it definitely picked up as I was reading it, and so it was worthy of 4 stars. So then I picked up something a little different. Picked up like a middle grade, I picked up like a middle grade book, although in Australia that's not what we call them. I have no idea what we call them, but I picked up A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. It's my first Patrick Ness book. Don't gasp in horror, okay, I understand. And I read A Monster Calls. Okay. This book basically follows a young boy who's like 12, 13. His mother has cancer, and he's dealing with all of that drama. But in the meantime, at night time, he's visited by a monster. And this monster wants to tell him 3 stories, and then the boy is going to have to tell a 4th story, which is meant to be the truth. That's the premise of the book. It is high emotions. I am sure most people have seen someone on BookTube review this book, and they've said that they've cried or sobbed during it, and yes, I can see why. It's a very high emotion book. I mean, I didn't cry in this book, but that's because I'm emotionally stunted, so I got where all the emotions were coming from. I thought it was very well thought out. I thought the whole concept was interesting because Patrick Ness was using someone else's work and they'd passed away. I don't know if it's Siobhan Dowd or something like that. And that was interesting. I gave it 5 stars because I thought, you know, there was nothing I could fault it for, especially for the age that it was targeted at. But honestly, any age can read this book, and you should. Okay, we're getting to the home stretch. The second last book I read in the month of February was And Again by Jessica Chiarella? I saw Scribbles Reads, or Joyce from Scribbles Read review this book, and it sounded so interesting and sold me on reading it, so I picked it up from my library, and it was really fascinating. So the general premise of this book is there are people who are really sick, basically terminally ill, and there's a new experiment happening where they clone human bodies and then transfer memories into the bodies. The original host dies, but because their memories have been installed into the clones, they basically get a second lease on life. And the book deals with basically the after effects. The year after this is done to 4 people, follows their ups and downs in their lives after it, and really deals with the consequences. And there were so many things unseen. It was so interesting. There was an interesting debate about like tattoos and like having your body wiped clean, you know, people missing scars, people not feeling like the same person, all that sort of stuff. Plus there was like, after you've been sick for so long, how do you go back to your family as if nothing has happened? It was just a really interesting exploration, and I really enjoyed that aspect. and I really, there was a bit of scandal in it too, so I really got stuck into the book, and I found it really interesting. I was really bordering on a reading slump at the time, not because of any books, but just because I've been reading so much. But this book kept me in, and I loved it for that, so I gave it 4 stars because it is a good read, and I highly recommend it. After that, I was like, I need to stop reading books because I have to return them to the library and start reading books that I want to enjoy. So I picked up Captive Prince by C.S. Picard. Yes. Because I've been really wanting to read this series. And I just couldn't hold out any longer. So this is basically, this is contending with Small Angry Planet, which is what the short way I call the series, for favourite, because I love this. Basically, it follows Damon, who is a prince. His father has just passed away. His half-brother, who is illegitimate, sneakily takes over the throne and basically ends up giving Damon to their enemies as a pleasure slave. And Damon ends up being the pleasure slave to the enemy state's Prince Laurent. And things go from there. There's a lot of political intrigue. And yes, okay, pleasure slaves, obviously it could be written really well or it could be written really bad. This is written really well, but because it's told from Damon's perspective and he is the pleasure slave, he's not really a pleasure slave, he's a slave. Yes, you can, it deals with the issue of consent and rape and all sexual abuse and normal abuse. It deals with all that fairly well because it is constantly frowned upon. But if that sort of stuff does trigger you, then I would definitely maybe get someone else to read it first who knows you, because yeah, it could be a bit too much. That being said, C.S. Picard wrote really well. Like, this was actually a comic series before it became a book, and it was just so popular that it became a book. So considering that, the writing was really good. I mean, it's not perfect. It's not going to change your world, but it's enjoyable. It gets the job done. C.S. Picard is Australian, so she wins points for me for that, because hello, fellow Australian. The characters, oh my god. The characters are wonderful, and there is pretty much no romance in this book, despite what you may think. And I really appreciate that, because enemies to lovers is my favourite book trope, but it has to be done well, and this was done in such a slow burn way that it just had to be done well. The world building is a little flat, right? It's kind of taking for granted basic knowledge of like medieval era stuff. So yeah, if like you are a big fantasy fan and world building is like the #1 thing, you might be disappointed. But everything else, oh, so good. So good. And I gave this 5 stars, and I love it. And I went and immediately bought the entire series because that's how much I loved it. But that's what I fit in February, 11 books. I'm so happy with myself. I'm not going to try and push it so much next time, but we'll see. So I hope you found some books for you to read, or maybe you've read them. If so, comment below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!